Hi, I'm Dr. Meg Peterson. I'm a lecturer in the Department for Culture, Media, Creative Industries at King's College London. I'm also an artist and an evaluator, producer. So I was the lead researcher, the PI for this project.
Hi, I am Marina Sacco. I'm the engagement producer at Few, and I'm the producing partner on this project. And also here representing Gloria Patrick, who's the lead artist on the project. So the project is called Osoyegbon, which means I'm not a slave. And it's the Nigerian name of Gloria Patrick, who's the lead artist on the project and is also a woman with a lived experience of trafficking and modern slavery. And this is a project that started actually many years ago, but we finally kind of managed to bring it alive this year with this funding. Because the organization FEW met Gloria in 2012 as part of a sharing organized by an organization called the Poppy Project that offered sort of theater experience and theater as a medium to newly rescued victims of traffic. Our director, Kate McGrath, met Gloria there and started to cultivate a relationship, which in 2014 led to the creation of a first version of Gloria's story in a theatre form. And it was under the name Letters to Oprah, where Oprah is Oprah Winfrey, who's been a great inspiration in her life. Few years went by, more development. In 2019, Gloria shared that story in a longer version called Osoyegbon this time. And it was her first experience on a big stage, I would say, because it was at the Edinburgh International Festival of Theatre. It was for a selected audience, and the response was brilliant. So at the end of that experience, Gloria, together with Fuel, kind of evaluated what the next steps would have been, because although that had been a brilliant kind of experience as a performer, didn't quite fulfill everything she wanted to do, because she has this true calling to kind of be an activist and really make some change happen at a social level, and wanting to kind of reclaim her story and her experience and empower young people who might have, been going through something very similar, or, are more easily victims of this kind of situations. So that paired with the fact that, of course, performing has very strong emotional toll, especially when it's a personal story, kind of led to this decision that maybe the next step was going to be creating a short animated film, which on one hand was easily to distribute, could target a younger audience, but also meant complete safety for Gloria, who didn't have to kind of be on stage every night and expose herself to an audience with such a personal story. So this is the background, and we started to work with Solace Women's Aid, which is an organization that had supported also Gloria in the past, and created an engagement offer together with this short film. And this was really what Gloria wanted to do. Um, and this short engagement offer is made of a toolkit and a workshop. And the two things together aim to kind of unlock intergenerational conversations between adults and young people to talk about what sexual abuse is, what trafficking is, what modern slavery means, and all of these conversations that might not normally come up in a secondary school class or, just with your parents.
As far as findings, it really reinforced the kind of understanding of the power of creative approaches in raising awareness and increasing dialogue around really sensitive topics. I think there's a really special place that, if done with care and with a certain level of consideration, that if you're using something that has a bit of a different kind of angle, which is in this case the film and the workshops, it has this potential to really kind of be much more powerful for the person who's kind of taking part within those activities. So the potential for impact is much greater. That was really evident in showing the film and having the kind of discussion around the workshops when we did that with the women at Clean Break. So just really kind of, seeing the power of creativity within social change, and particularly in in raising awareness around very difficult subjects that are hard to talk about, and they're hard for teachers to talk about. They're hard for parents to talk about. So, using these, leaning on these tools as a kind of a way to kind of have those conversations and to be able to have dialogue, because it needs to happen, with children as well. So we were able to test it with a group of women, amazing women from an organization called Clean Break. And they, through the connection, Fuel had a kind of previous connection with them. And they're all women who have had some sort of previous lived experience of the criminal justice system. A lot of them, they weren't actually, I don't think any of them had personal experience of trafficking themselves, but they have worked with people and knew people that had been through that experience. So they could really speak quite eloquently about uh, the potential for the film and the toolkit, but also some of the things that we perhaps needed to change and shift, to make it a bit more accessible, to kind of prevent stereotypes or barriers. So we can go through that in a little bit more detail. But so we were able to kind of test it with them. So it was kind of simulating some of the workshop activities, as well as showing them the film and allowing them the space to feedback and discuss. And so it gave them kind of a real taste of what that experience would be like. And it was a really, really rich experience, really rich discussion. And we got some really amazing feedback that were then able to take into some of the learning, but also into the next stages of development. So using a kind of like prototyping methodology. So rather than like just working so much on like making it perfect and final, it's actually like testing things before they're completely finished, so that there can be some feedback to then go into the development of the kind of later stages. So yeah, we were able to, and it was a really, really valuable experience with the Clean Break women.
We completed 1 minute of animation. The short film is actually 4 minutes. So we completed that 1 minute and we kind of created the whole wraparound activity and the storyboard for the full film. So the skeleton is all there. What needs to happen next is that Fuel is going to look for further funding, which is something we have already started to do. We've learned how expensive making an animation is. So the goal would be to, I want to say over the next 6 months, I'm being optimistic, kind of raise the money, complete the film, embed the learning from this phase into the toolkit, into the workshop, into the design of the animation, and then bring it into the world and offer it to secondary schools and youth groups. I hope in the next year we're gonna test it with about 4, 5 schools, really. But again, it's funding dependent. The ambition is for this to, then have a longer life and a wider outreach. It tells an international story. Again, this story was set in Nigeria, but really what it says is this can happen anywhere. And there are many countries that experience this very closely because they are stops around of the trafficking routes. And it's a short film, which means it can be dubbed very easily. A wish for the future would surely be for this to be distributed more widely than just the UK. I cannot speak for Meg, but she will add to it. But we both, and the experiences we had as individuals, but also with the organizations we work with, worked previously in social change. And it's one of the values that Fuel as an organization carries as well. So we try to work always more with like individuals who might have non-mainstream stories, let's put it that way, and kind of use creativity also as a tool to kind of provoke difficult conversations and unlock change. Of course, it's very ambitious when you're just making theater, right? But I think, especially in the, at least for me, especially in the climate where we live, where it's always also harder to kind of make art, like there isn't much much funding, um, creating something that has a value and can kind of serve the communities that are also meant to be audiences, it just brings the whole work we do on another level. So I guess this is it for me.
Yeah, and same for me. I think the for the last really like 15 years, my work has been really embedded in some form of creativity and social change. So kind of seeing the value of creativity, not just in the kind of traditional arts output setting where it's a theater show, it's an exhibition, it's a kind of creative product, is looking at what's the value of creative process within social change. And I've worked on, various projects over the years that have explored that. And I think that was and Marina and I knew each other from before because we used to work together at Battersea Art Center. So we kind of had, from a partnership standpoint, we had a previous relationship of working together on projects at BAC. So that it was just a great kind of opportunity for us to come together and to collaborate again, because we have this really kind of quite embedded shared ethos around this kind of focus of creativity and social change. And I think, as a researcher, as an artist myself, constantly quite curious and seeking methodologies of how this can be done, because I think it's still really underexplored, and and a really untapped potential within the creative industries, especially in the UK, but globally, really, to try and kind of untap, tap into what's the magic of using creativity in these sort of scenarios.
From a producer point of view, I think for Fuel, this was probably the first time creating an animated film. So even just in terms of skills learned and understanding of how that process works, it's been brilliant. It's been absolutely brilliant and such a valuable experience. And I think something really good was that all the creatives involved in some way were testing something new. So, for instance, the animators we work with, they are brilliant animators. They have an amazing portfolio, but they've wanted to work on a social change project rather than a commercial one for some time. And this was the chance to do that. And they were so generous. Um, so the way that worked out, working with Solace, of course, like Fuel works with a number of third sector organizations, and we do a lot like work that goes in that direction. But Solace had a previous relationship with Gloria, and it was the first time for us. We kind of sat down with a partner who has such a specific skill set, because what they do is they support women who have been victims of abuse, and kind of sitting down together and creating a practical toolkit that is creative, but then really delivers what people who engage with those experiences might need. So I think this has been extremely successful, and not last engaging with Clean Break. As Meg said, it was such a good focus group, and we got exactly the kind of critical feedback that we needed, in the sense that the women in the room really confirmed the production level of the animation, and that is, of course, brilliant. But they raised such good points about how we should narrow down the aim of the toolkit, how we should maybe relook at the way the story is framed in some points, because we need to be careful with different experiences that might be in the room. That if we hadn't done that, of course, we would have relied on Gloria's experience, who's the lead artist, but it's not the only experience. So I think this has been probably one of the main learning and successes for me.
Yeah, I would echo that. And I guess just to add, from my perspective, the all of the kind of partnership working, connecting with all of these different organizations was really powerful for me, and also very smooth. And I think, just really learned a lot from even just the short kind of interaction that we had with Clean Break. Um, and really seeing the power of this creative toolkit as well as the film to really raise awareness, but also to highlight, the just the complexities of using creative approaches as well. I think, just the challenges of some of the things that they picked up on were so articulate about, imagery and how you kind of represent people and how the gender of the hand in the film and how that can, misrepresent, who are the people who are behind human trafficking, or, it's just little things around race and how do you kind of personalize and tell someone's story, um, and not have it be just like a kind of generalized without perpetuating stereotypes about people from those countries, in this case Nigeria. So it's like, how do you make it kind of personal but also have this universal sort of relation to people who might take part in any sort of experience, and just really, the level of care that I think sometimes, that seeing that these things are done in a bit of a kind of flippant way, or just like, yeah, we'll just show a film and then the students will learn. But actually, there needs to be so much wraparound activity. And I think that the kind of collaboration between the Fuel and the animated film and Solace, who were running the workshops, was really brilliant, because it was a way to kind of just really hold all of them within the context of that. And to me, every aspect of that is, there's an element of creativity and a kind of creative approach that, um, I think is like, when you think of a creative approach, you think about the film, but actually there's a lot of kind of just creativity within social human interaction that to me was really present in that room, that I think I'll definitely take away in lots of other things that I do in the future.
But having a pre-existing relationship, I think, probably gave us some advantage, especially when it came down to, bureaucratical difficulties. Like, we Fuel is a brilliant independent producing house, but we are relatively small, which has pros and cons. One of the pros, though, I think, is that we can act quite quickly. But this means we have very different timelines compared to big organizations like King's College, for example. And I think if we hadn't had such, an understanding of each other's work, it would have been more complicated in some moments to understand why we had to shift timelines. The fact that Meg is not just an academic, but is also an artist and is also a producer, I think enriched a lot that relationship on our end for sure.
Yeah, and I guess just to add as well, I think that level of trust also, when there was like kind of delays in the process, it's kind of just knowing that we would figure it out, and that, Marina's amazing, and that, we've worked together before. So I wasn't really worried at any point throughout the process that, oh no, we're not going to get it done, or I'm not really sure, so, because it was, from my perspective, it was very much dependent on the relationships that Fuel Theater had with other organizations to kind of really make sure that everything was implemented properly. So, yeah, I think that level of trust really helped to kind of just make sure, yeah, through all the bureaucratic issues, but also just generally, I think, making it a really enjoyable process. There's a lot of bureaucratic processes that inhibit collaborative working, especially when you're working outside of a traditional research setting, working in the sector, working in schools, and also collaborating with organizations that don't have these sort of processes in the same way. Um, it can be really inhibitive. And I think if it wasn't for Marina and I having worked together before, I think that organization, whoever I was working with, would have been extremely frustrated and maybe ducked out of the project because it was so onerous, all of the back and forth and the changing. So I think, yeah, there just needs to be a look into, why are these processes so bureaucratic? I understand from an ethical standpoint, they're trying to cover their back to not, cause harm or to, have any sort of liability in some of these situations, but to try and really understand from a legal perspective what's possible, how can we streamline some of these things, streamline payments, streamline contracts. um yeah, I don't know, Marina, if you want to add anything onto that.
No, I think you synthesize it really well because there is great potential. But the truth is that if systems were simpler, that, and this does not depend on the officer or on the people we directly interacted with, it has to happen at a different level. um, we could allocate so much more in terms of time and energies to the actual project and the actual research, instead of spending a lot of time doing desk work. Um, so it's almost like, looking at a brilliant resource and knowing that already 60% of that in terms of time will be allocated to kind of the backstage work. So I think you said it perfectly.
I would really love to continue to be involved. I guess it just depends on, yeah, once again, funding, and I suppose getting on top of these bureaucratic processes, so that it makes sense for the project. Because I think having a researcher as part of it does really add another layer of complexity, as far as ethical clearance and things that if it's fuel on their own, this is just not there. Uh, but I think I'll definitely be sharing this learning within the classroom because I'm a lecturer in culture, media, creative industries at King's. So using this as a kind of case study example. I've also been doing some other work around migration and refugees. So taking a lot of this learning and embedding it within some of those future projects, definitely. And I mean, in the short term, writing a blog and sharing the learning as part of Refugee Week in June, and then kind of, I guess, yeah, seeing where it goes from there. With creative approaches, sometimes there's also just other layers of complexities that you have to take into consideration around visual imagery, around how things are framed, making sure that whoever's leading workshops, has a certain level of training and understanding of how to hold space for these sorts of conversations, because they are quite difficult to have. And sometimes, because these are very hidden things that maybe people don't talk about openly, there's the potential for people to be triggered, I think, unexpectedly as well as part of this. So just making sure that there's support in the room. I think we had two support workers that were in the room with us, alongside Marina and Solace, who was running the workshop, just in case anything came up. And I think if you're doing it with young people, there needs to be that similar sort of support for them. But then also, I think, building on that, seeing just the value of not just having a kind of creative output, but having activities that kind of wrap around that creative output, that film, that is really, really, it's essential, really, to for them to be able to embed and understand the kind of deeper preconceptions that maybe they have around trafficking and some of these sort of sensitive topics, but to really have a chance to unpack that in a really safe and supportive way. So just kind of seeing, yeah, all of those things combined.
In the future, the next step is definitely going to be about cultivating this partnership. So the animators, Arc Studio, a brilliant first interaction for them with the social change, creativity and social change world. So we will keep working together. They have already the redesign phase booked in June to embed the findings of this phase in the animation. The partnership with Solace, it's been incredible. We've learned so much from the way they articulate a workshop, and I think there's just been a great synergy. So we're already talking about, as soon as there is funding, how can we start to book the workshops, and how do we want them to look like? What have we learned from this phase? And from this point of view, of course, the partnership with King's College, as Meg said, like the hope is, of course, that we can keep working in some measure on this project together, whether it is sharing it as a lecture with your students, or if it's in other context. But there will be more learning coming from this project as it grows. So yeah, I think this first phase guaranteed us very strong partnerships, and everyone is learning from one another.
I guess the only thing I would add is just that I think, even though we were sort of critical about these bureaucratic processes, there really should be so many more projects like this, and to continue to do these sort of cross-sector collaborative creative projects, and having funding available to test ideas, to me, is incredibly valuable. So just yeah, to continue to invest in these sorts of things. I think that it's clear that this project, hopefully will have a very long life, based on this sort of seed funding. So just to continue to do these sorts of projects, I think is yeah, would be great.
As I said, I'm here representing also Gloria, who's the lead artist on this project. A massive shout out and well done to her, because really we are here to deliver her hard work, the hard work of many people, but her hard work, and it's her story. And she's been extremely generous. So massive shout out to her, and also to the Clean Break team that welcomed us and allowed us to talk about difficult matters, and just gave back a lot of honest feedback that left us energized and ready for the next stage. And then I guess just many thanks to, of course, our funders and Arc Studio, the animators. Abby Dare is a brilliant novelist who adapted the script for this version. Solas, who made this come alive in the toolkit and in the workshop, and we learned so much from them.